So Salesforce welcomes all, and we are delighted to welcome you to the 2017 Equality Keynote, featuring Carlos Watson, Laurene Powell Jobs, will.i.am, and JR. Please join me.
Where are you?
Thank you.
You're on the end there.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Oh, you can have that or that. Hey guys, a big hand for Tony, please.
Yeah.
Another big hand for Tony Prophet. I'm Carlos Watson. I'm your host today. I've been an admirer of Tony's from afar. I've followed what he's shared on social media and elsewhere, but Tony, I have to say I'm even more proud to know you today, just seeing some of what you and others have accomplished together. So thank you for having us all here today. We're gonna have a great conversation today about equality and activism, education. And what I wanted to do in order to get us started, I always find, at least for me, it's helpful to get a little backstory to start. And so I wanted to ask each of the folks today, I wanted to ask Will, I wanted to ask Laurene, I wanted to ask JR, how did you begin to think about art and activism coming together? What was it in your background, your life? Was there a moment that made you start to think that art and activism belong together? And so, Laurene, maybe I'll start with you. When did you first start thinking about bringing those two together?
Well, after seeing that film again, I want to say that I'm a champion. And I'm a champion for others. I'm a champion for those who are like me, those who are not like me, for the sort of for the human race in a way. So I love that phrasing. And as a champion, a believer of spreading the access to opportunity, I've tried sort of a straightforward approach, having been educated in sort of a straightforward way and working on Wall Street. And then when I had the opportunity through college track to meet with students and to understand how we could bridge some of the gaps that were obvious and easily bridged, there were many, many more systemic problems that we discovered along the way, systemic obstacles that needed perhaps not a straightforward solution, but a solution that came and wrapped around that issue and other issues that came before us in a more holistic and comprehensive way. And a lot of that has to do with culture and behavior and attitude and identity. And that's the realm of arts and artists. And so then I had the great good fortune, in fact, to work with both of these extraordinary artists that you have today, to raise awareness for certain issues that are in front of us in our society today, and to have people connect to them in a different way that's perhaps not the straightforward literal way, but a much more deep, emotional, profound understanding of unequal access to education, of the purgatory that our immigration laws leave people in, so that it resonates and rests in people at a more spiritual and soulful level.
Well, what about you? I mean, we've seen, you hear Laurene talk about different tools that people use in order to try and promote change, and that people may connect with you as an artist in a different way than they may with a politician or they may with a journalist. Was it always obvious to you that you wanted to use your art for activism, or did that come later in your journey?
Well, activism is it's a strong word. It's a word that comes with a lot of responsibility. But at the same time, when I was in the projects, I was active in the projects. When we were broke and poor, we handed out free lunches at the summer lunch program. My mom worked up at the school, for the after school program to keep kids off the streets. My uncle was, the little league coach to keep the kids away from the gangs. So activism isn't always because you have a position. Activism is what you do in the community because you have a position. And And then I was influenced by, of course, the Bob Marleys and the Public Enemies and the KRS-Ones, Boogie Down Productions. And they're the ones who told me, hey, if you're gonna do music, this is why you do music. Either you talk about it or you be about it and you do about it. And so Black Eyed Peas' success came because of Where's the Love. Although we made, music because we were inspired by a Tribe Called Quest, that success came because of that song. And that took us to a whole different part of the world and speaking to larger groups of people. And that's responsibility. It tells you how to behave when you go out there in the world and what crowd not to be around with, because it doesn't really, rhyme with the work that people are attracted to. It's magnetic and attracts you to folks to where now, I never would have thought in my wildest dreams that I'll be working with Laurene Powell Jobs. Never thought that. Didn't think it was possible. Didn't think that, being in the projects when you're just trying to stay away from police brutality and gangs and drugs, that I would work with people like Ron Conway and Mark Benioff. Didn't think that was possible. Didn't think that, music, and doing your little piece with Yes We Can could really hit the needle, move the needle and be effective and help Obama take the lead from Hillary in 2008. Didn't think that music would be that powerful. But you're supposed to follow the leader, and those leaders at the time are the Bob Marleys and the Bob Dylans, and try your part to do it from an honest, pure place to bring about, resolution to folks out there, that are hopeless, they've given up, they feel like they have no voice, the voiceless. And so there is a lot of responsibility with that word activism, whether you have a voice or not. Voice meaning in popular culture, but there's awesome people in the community, all the folks that are at the park and recreation, teaching kids, Little League, those are superheroes. The after school program teacher, she's a superhero. It's not because you're famous.
JR, talk to me about how your art began to move into activism. A lot of people have appreciated your work all over the world. You've touched on questions of immigration, you've touched on questions of opportunity, identity, but I don't think that's how it started.
It started very simply. I was just a kid writing my names on walls, and when you think about it, writing your own name on wall is the most egocentric, way of saying, I'm here, I exist. Maybe it's because, growing up in the suburbs of Paris, you want to be, out there somewhere in the world so that people can notice you. I was never really good at it, but I was good at climbing buildings and leaving some little marks up there, so it's still there today. But the day I discovered that I could take photos and print them and paste them in the street, and that suddenly people in a suit would stop and look at it, I was like, damn, the power of the image, the power of paper and glue is much stronger than I think. And for me at that time, I was only thinking that if I go to the north or the south of Paris, that's crossing the entire world. I knew nothing else. Yeah. I was really that's it. Going east or west or in a different arrondissement of Paris was the biggest thing that I had to accomplish. And I think I have to thank the mayor of the suburbs where I started, who sued me when I was 18 years old. And I was so scared to pay the fine that I left France for 1 year. And I went and couch surf in other artists, house around Europe, taking trains and sleeping and I would each time ask an artist, do you know someone that you really love and respect? Oh yeah, you need to meet that guy in Italy, he's amazing, let me connect you. And I would learn from them. And then slowly I started enlarging my photos. When I came back to Paris a year after, the riots had started exactly in the neighborhood where the mayor sued me. So my photos were on the back of the largest riots that we have in France since the French Revolution. So I was on the cover of New York Times at 19 years old by accident. It was the background of the riots. And I think at that moment, I understand that with those images, I could touch people, I could communicate. And even staying in the shadow, which I'm still doing partially because a lot of the work that I still do today is illegal. The little kid at the border was illegal, and a lot of works like that I have to do this way. So I guess, it's interesting that in some countries it's seen as art, and in some others it's still seen as a crime.
Laurene, I want to go back to this thought about how do you create change. And before we start talking about it, I want to actually show people a little bit of video of some of the work that you've been involved in and others have been involved in it, college track and Activism.
I think for people sitting in the audience, it's a lot more interesting to see some examples of art rather than hear people speak esoterically about the role of art and activism. So this piece is from a documentary film that we're making around the XQ movement to transform high schools in America. And we started the film, and we started actually that piece of work by going around the United States and talking to holding student roundtables and also some civic leader roundtables, and just listening to students and asking them about their hopes and dreams, asking them about their school experience. And this is a short 1-minute snip of students from Roosevelt High School that Will's really familiar with in Boyle Heights.
Los Angeles. Let's see if we can play that.
I never thought I was gonna go to college. I thought I was gonna be a girl from the hood, just going to jail back and forth. School changes the way you see things, but how are we gonna give this chance to the kids that don't see it? Why don't they see it?
It's about learning, and it's about having knowledge of something. And that's what the school system is forgetting about, So give us research-based projects. Give us a challenge, and that's what high schools forget to do. They forget the challenges.
How are you gonna learn the way I learn? You can't. Because I'm a unique person, you're unique, you're different.
I feel like there should be more of this happening than just us. We're like so excited for this and to actually speak up and make a change for like the new future.
Laurene, how optimistic are you today for the future opportunities of those kids?
Well, I never met Anthony, but just listening to him and knowing thousands of students like him, how could we not be optimistic? And for those students, those students are self-directed, and they're making their way to higher ed. Unfortunately, if you saw the recent statistics, actually just today, that EdTrust West put out, listen to this statistic, in no county in California are Latino students prepared, the majority of Latino students prepared in either math or English language arts in the 4th, the 8th, or the 12th grade. So those are sobering and terrible statistics.
So does that, when you hear that and when you realize that, does that say to you, as optimistic as you want to be, that you shouldn't be, that's naive, that's overly hopeful?
I think there's a difference between being optimistic and being honest about what's going on in our own backyard and in our country. I think I'm optimistic about human nature and human ingenuity and human creativity. I'm also optimistic that given the opportunity, those statistics can change quickly. I'm depressed by those statistics, and I'm a little angered by them because it doesn't have to be this way. And the second we make an excellent education for every student everywhere a national priority, it could actually happen. So that's why we keep pushing, Carlos. That's why we keep communicating. That's why we keep doing the work that we do, because we all have to be relentless. When we see the truth, we have to speak the truth. That veil falls, you can't unsee it. And so we just have to keep pushing and pushing in every avenue we can, especially using the arts.
Will, how do you see it? Because, part of what, and I hope we'll show some of what you've done in the neighborhood that you grew up with, a lot of people weren't graduating from high school. A lot of people were following a very different path. And you've helped create, along with Laurene and others, you've helped create one of the most successful college prep programs there. Why do you think it's working? And not just working, but working really well?
It's working really well because of how we started. And when Ron Conway introduced me to Laurene, what now, 7 years ago? Yeah. 7 years ago? No.
You were both
8
young.
years ago? Yeah. 8 years ago. And it was like the happiest day of my life, because Ron was like, I reached out to Ron, I was like, there's this program called College Track. I'm trying to look for Superman because I saw this movie called Waiting for Superman. And I realized that there are people like Jack Dangerman and Dean Kamen and Laurene Powell Jobs that are Supermen, Superwoman and Superman. They exist. And the problem with that movie was they didn't tell you who Superman was. They told you that, LA, Roosevelt, was one of the lowest performing schools in America. That's a school my mom went to. That's a school I should have went to if my mom didn't put me in the magnet program and I got bussed out to East LA. And so when Ron connected with me, it was on a hope. It was a whim, like, hey, can you bring College Track to LA? Because at the time, they didn't have a College Track in LA. And I wanted to have College Track as a spine, and then a robotics program as the brain, the arms, and a coding program as the feet, and create a whole new body of encouragement and a faculty to change these kids' lives and transform them so that they are they are their own Calvary. And we were honest with them by saying, no one's coming to save you. There's a prison down the street that you guys are probably going to, end up in. There's juvenile hall that you're going to go in and out of. The girls, you're probably going to get pregnant before you're 22. Guys, you're going to be.
Wait, you were that direct with kids?
The first kids, yes.
And what was their reaction? Did they get turned off by you being that direct?
No, because they know it's true. No one tells them that. That's the reason why they're ditching, because they know it's true. Their brothers are in and out of jail. They know it's true. The gangs that's business. They have a product. And they're recruiting kids at 9 years old. That's a business, bro. The prison is a business. So you gotta treat it like business and tell them that you guys are the agent of your own change. You are gonna save yourself. Here's a skill set. Here are these tools. And people want you to win. Here's some mentors. And, and it worked. And your grades are currency, right? And so we use their grades as a way to, like, if you go from a 1.0, because these kids were failing. We didn't get like the best kids. We got the worst kids. From 1.0s to not even 0. Whatever they were never attending, to 3.5s and 4.0s by the time we were finished, And that first 65 kids, 100% of them graduated. 70% of them are now going to school with an engineering degree in robotics and computer science.
Well, yeah, they're all going on to 4-year, and in subsequent years it's at 90%. But what he was saying is really extraordinary, that 70% of that class is studying a STEM field.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think that high a number of kids are participating in STEM fields? What is College Track doing, in particular in Boyle Heights and LA, that's causing that to happen?
So College Track is it's like rehabilitating. It's like a rehab for school. It's like it takes low performance kids and rehabilitates them and puts them on a path. So, but my thing was, a diploma is not enough. Just having a diploma and debt, that's the worst thing for somebody in the hood. So, hey, while you're on course to go to college, why don't you learn this computer science course so you not only fill jobs, but can create jobs? Why don't you learn this robotics course so you not only fill jobs, but create jobs? There's so many jobs out there that are not filled, and the areas that we need jobs. We need people to fill them. So the recipe, the cocktail was like College Track is the rehabilitation, the computer science and the robotics is the way for them to ensure that they fill and create jobs. And it's worked, right? And it's so amazing to see how enthusiastic they are. And we went from having this persona of like, I don't want to be a geek, to where that shit is chic. They going to school like, yo, what's up?
I actually was just saying that to Laurene, that when I was growing up, no one would have proudly said I'm a geek, I'm a nerd, any of that, and something's changed.
There's a new geek, bro.
Yeah.
There's a new type of like, about it. Right? It's a new I remember do you remember when we were in Watts? I was like, I can't believe I am rocking with Laurene and we in Watts together. We were in Watts and I told the kids, whoever gets a 4.0, I'm gonna give y'all $1,000. I owe these kids like a lot of money.
Are you trying to say you haven't been back to Watts in a long time?
No, it's like, I owe these kids like almost like $50,000 because I got like 50 kids, they got like 4.0s, which is dope.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're competing with. You're competing with the drug dealer already got them, bro. They making $1,000 a year at least. So how are you gonna get a kid to join the program if that's the environment they're in? So you gotta compete, and that's how real you have to be with them. You gotta speak their language. I come from that community. I know what it's like. I used to write my name on the wall too.
All right, JR, take us through, how many of you have been able to appreciate and enjoy some of JR's work, whether you've watched it win the TED Prize or you've seen it in the Times or elsewhere? JR, we've got a number of, we've got some of your work here. Will you take people through your work a little bit and give them a tour and explain why you chose to do work like this Ellis Island piece that you did here?
You know, I'm second generation immigrant in France, and I guess living in New York in 7 years, you have Ellis Island that's just close by to you. And I started working on this just because I heard there was an abandoned side of Ellis Island. That's the real reason. I was like, wow, there's a place that no one have seen. That's you know, I was like, I want to see it then. That's how writers function. They're like, they want to go to places people don't.
That's catnip for you.
So I went there. It took a bit of time, but I got the authorization to use the archive of Ellis Island and to actually paste them in places where no one would ever see them. This is the abandoned site where the migrants used to pass by, and Ellis Island is almost two islands with a tunnel in the middle. People arrived here. If they're not sure to get in, or if they have to go to the hospital or get cured, they would go through that tunnel and wait here, and then some would be deported back to their country. So this is a place where there's a lot of energies. I pasted those images that I didn't took that were from the time in those rooms that are completely abandoned in the middle of the water. And by chance, they accepted to get people to see them. So today, people can go and see them with a hard hat and with two guards from Ellis Island, and you can go and visit this place where you feel like you're the first person to be on since they actually left the island and closed the island in 1938. And then that's an image taken there also. That's a current situation.
Wow.
I've actually, that was an image of a migrant that arrived in New York a couple of years ago, and that's in the shadow of the city. Now, the funny thing about that one is that this was the cover of New York Times Magazine, and the head of New York Times was like, we want you to do a cover, but it have to be, we want the exclusivity of it. I was like, all right, see you, man. All my stuff is in the street, so, sorry, can't help you. And then they would keep writing me and say, well, can we discuss at least? And I was like, sure, I love to discuss, but there's certain rules that I don't change. Like, for example, there's never any logos on my work. I don't even sign my own work, and there's never any corporate sponsor behind it. That's something very important since the beginning. And so,
why is that? Why is that?
Because, look, I'm telling the story of this kid, and why would I tell you it's powered by Pepsi or Coca-Cola? I love Coca-Cola and I love Pepsi. I mean, I prefer Coca-Cola, but I have nothing to do with that, It's not something against branding. It's something that I work with images. And I remember I was 22 when someone offered me $1 million to do a project for a brand. And it was the head of a big advertising company. And I was on the phone, I was walking in the street, I didn't plan that call. And the guy said, yo, kid, come on, I'm serious. Like, fly here, we have a whole file on you. You're going to do this thing for Levi. So I forgot one, just it's the same thing, except we're going to see the brand on it. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I don't work with brand. He's like, do you understand that you're going to make a lot of money? Then you do whatever you want with your no branding stuff. And I told him, look, sir, you're doing advertising. I'm doing art. If I start doing like you, what's the difference between you and me? And and then since then, actually, the funny thing is,
You've been called them every year for a job?
Yeah, but every couple of years, they hire the number and be like, okay, would you do it for, there's always a number to it. And I'm like, guys, I would have already switched on, if I wanted to, but I don't. I think, it's much more stronger that image is actually by the people, for the people. And this image was actually pasted on the floor of Flatiron Plaza in the middle of the night. It stayed there all day. And you know how it is in Flatiron Plaza. People eat ice cream and look at the Flatiron Plaza and take photos. So they never saw the pasting. They walk on that kid all day. No one took a photo. And then slowly it disintegrated itself. And I went on a helicopter and photographed it from above. And suddenly everyone else is in the shadow and he's in the light. That's, for me, the power of paper and glue. And you see, it's strips of paper. So we hand paste it. That one is in Philadelphia. That's the guy selling hot dogs at the corner, and it stayed there for a year. And I never write anything on it. I use my Instagram to share the story of the people, but if you just want to say, oh, I saw that guy, or I'm not interested, that's fine. I'm not like on an advertising way. It's written where I want you to think like this or like that. This is all, if you want to look for his story, it will be there, but you have to do that step. Now, I love to think of the impossible. And I dream about walls a lot because I paste on walls, And recently there's this guy on television that talked a lot about this, wall at the border. And I don't know, I'm from France. I don't have all the information, And anyway, he was talking about a wall that have see-through. So I went and see it by myself. And when I went there was already a wall. And I went and, talked to people. And as I knocked, actually, you see the houses on the back of that photo? The house is right behind. It's really close to the wall, because the wall goes in a curve like that. And I knocked at the person's house to be like, excuse me, I want to ask you something, because your house is really close from the wall. I want to do an art project. And it's like, oh, I follow you on Instagram. like, no, I don't think so. I'm a French artist. I think so. And then she put on the Wi-Fi, and we looked. And then she was like, oh, my God, if you wanted my house to do any project, please. And I was like, oh, thank you. I mean, I don't know if it would work, but... And I remember the whole time there was this little kid looking at me in his crib. And then I left the house. I started driving, following the wall back to Tijuana. And then on the way, I was like, damn, that's the kid. Every day he's from that house, looking over the wall, but not having any perspective, political perspective over that. He's just looking, at the view in front of him. He don't see any wall the way we see it. And I went back. I asked her if I could photograph her kid. And she said, sure. I said, look, I have to build the wall bigger than the wall to make it look ridiculous. And that's how we built the little kid. And we were together with Laurene that day. And so I was on the other side when we were finishing, came back from, and on the US side, because this is on the Mexican side. And then literally that was on day one. There was actually nobody because no one knew. And we just posted that image, and where we haven't even finished it. And then by the next day, hundreds of people started coming. And I remember we were there. I went back on the US side, and we were talking to a few people. And then people from the Mexican side started arriving. And you remember, Laurene, we were there talking with them through the fence. How ridiculous was the situation? We were integrating a piece where we were all talking through the fence. Anyway, what happened throughout that month that the piece stayed up is that I never went back, but hundreds of people went back every day. And I keep hearing stories that people were passing phones through the wall and to ask the other to take a photo of themselves. And I was like, wow, and the Border Patrol do nothing? And a lot of journalists reported on it, and they said, no, actually, it's amazing. There's like every day hundreds of people talking to each other. And that's actually the heart of my work. It's not to build big images. It's the excuse to bring people back together. Especially on the US side, where no one really, there's a few bikers that pass there, but it's not as crowded area as on the Mexican side. So we started brainstorming about a quite impossible idea. That was not that long ago. I think it was 20 days or something like that ago that we started brainstorming, and we've done it almost like 10, 15 days ago. To do, how we do in the art world, often they like to do a big dinner at the end of an art piece, So we were like, why don't we do one to close this piece? And it would be great to make a big table and that go from one side all the way to the other side. And that for a moment, we don't see the wall. And
Great.
there's all the signs for it to be impossible. First, we asked on the US side, because it would be bringing a lot of people, and they say, if you do that, we're going to close the road, we're going to arrest everybody, and it'd be a disaster. They send a lawyer later. That was the 2 days before we went there. And we have already, Laurene had put me in touch with a woman, a dreamer, here in San Francisco. I came and met her, and I told her, I said, look, let me explain to you, because she had no idea about my work, and we just, you just put us in touch. I remember I was like, this is the idea, I want to build a table, I want your eyes to be on it. And she said, well, it's actually interesting because I have a sleepy eye. And it's because of the fact that I'm in the United States that I could actually you might phrase it better.
No, you're exactly right. But even more profoundly, it was because she received DACA status and was able to work that she received health care, that she could get the surgery to correct the lazy eye.
Which is the one that you see on the right side of the image on the US side. Now what happened is I told her, this is illegal, so you might not want to come to that, And actually, we decided the day before to actually invite nobody, because I was like, damn, if I announce it, they're going to block the roads and no one will be able to come. Now, what we've done is we did build the table on the Mexican side, and on the US side, we bring a big tarp. And the only thing I put the day before is I said, tomorrow is the last day to see the piece. And we thought that it would be great to do lunch at 1. I can tell you that at 12:30, there was nobody. And I remember sitting on the side of the piece being like, damn, maybe we should have announced it. There was literally nobody. Then as soon as I started people coming with their cars to see the piece, I was like, wait, can you wait? We're going to do something, a surprise. Can you just wait now that you come all the way? And in 30, 40 minutes, we started to have 30, 40 people, and then same on the Mexican side. And that's around 1:30, so an hour after, when a lot of people were there, we took the table on the US side out, and then the music started. We put a band, half on each side, the same band, so they play the same music. We shared the same food and the same water during a couple of hours. And you know what happened when the Border Patrol arrived? He actually came, he looked at all of it, and he came and cheered with me a cup of tea. I was on the Mexican side.
JR, that makes me wonder, do you think, by and large, your art tends to inspire people who already believe one way, or do you think you're actually able to change minds of people who feel differently?
I think it's a good question. I think by my work, I'm trying to even prove to myself that the limits are not where I think they are. And by doing that, I hope it does the same thing to other people. That's why I've been working on the sides of favelas, on the rooftops of slums in Kenya, in Liberia. I was just in Somalia a couple of months ago. I always try to go in places where everybody tells me that's not a place for art. Art should not be there. And then when I go there, I find a complete different situation. The reality, of course, but people telling me, yes, we do need art. Art is food for soul. Art is, is dignity. If we lose art, we lose humanity. And that forced me to, always change. even here talking today at Salesforce, I have to say I've never done any talk at any corporate meeting in my life, you know? But then hearing him here the last few days, and I'm hearing, and I'm like, wow, every single person that went on stage from the company or from outside the company, they talk about how do you help the other in your work, in your life, and it inspired me. It changed my perspective on how I saw corporate, you know, from the outside.
All right.
Oh, interesting. So you got changed by the experience.
Can I say one thing quickly about the image of the baby Kikito? That's been seen more than 1 billion times, that image. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
So certainly there are people there who didn't know about the issue or didn't really think about it, wasn't top of mind, where it became top of mind because of that.
Laurene, what's been the most interesting experience you've seen where a meaningful number of people have changed their opinion on a difficult topic? Because, you know, people often talk about the fact that if it's one-on-one, maybe I can change Will's mind, maybe Will could change my mind. If it's a few people who are kind of close to your opinion, you could move them a little bit. But moving lots of people on something where there's often a lot of stress, anxiety, agita, even anger on is hard. When have you been most intrigued or surprised by the fact that a meaningful number of people change their position?
That's a good question for everyone. I think certain shared experiences that are emotionally charged can be triggered by film, by a beautiful speech, by a beautiful piece of music. I think often when people open themselves up and they hear from great spiritual leaders like the Dalai Lama or like this current Pope, that it changes them in an ineffable way. I myself have been changed, and probably others have, by certain pieces of film, for example, because of the visual nature of it. But I'd be curious to hear what you guys think.
Well, what about you? Because I do think about what you did in New Hampshire in 2008 with others when President Obama, or then candidate Obama, had lost that race, and you and others came together and created a really powerful piece of art that I think shifted the conversation and maybe in some ways shifted his opportunity to have an impact. But what's the most interesting, surprising moment where you've seen people's minds change?
So that happened. A friend of mine who I was working with said, I want to use your song, I Got It From My Mama, and turn it to I'm Voting for Obama to get him elected. I said, if you use that song, he's not going to get elected and he'll lose. And he said, why? I was like, think about it, dude. You just said you want to use a song to get Obama elected president. That doesn't really add up. The math doesn't work. That's like saying I want to throw a rock from here to the moon. Now, you could get a rock to the moon, but you can't throw it to the moon. Like, you could do a song to get him no. Let's try to figure out the spaceship that gets the rock to the moon or gets Obama to get elected. So let's go down the path and have a conversation. When's the last time a public speaker or a politician speech has been taught in school? Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy, those are the last time we have speeches taught in school. His speech in New Hampshire was amazing. Now, if we could get that speech taught in school today, then we've done something. Now, how about if we turn that speech into a hymn? What if I make a song that just takes those same words and puts a melody on it? Some teacher is gonna teach that speech in school today, and then you move the needle, bro. He was like, so why don't you do it right now? I was like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm gonna do it right now. So I did it. So I recorded the song on took the speech on a Thursday, finished it on 2 hours later, shot the video on a Tuesday, called up all our friends because it was like someone's birthday party in Hollywood. So I called all those folks like, you voting for Obama? Okay, y'all need to come and do this video. Cost us about $2,000 in camera equipment. On that Thursday, it was complete, the video. That Friday, took it to ABC to do a news report. That Super Bowl Sunday, it got 20 million views on YouTube because YouTube was a fairly new platform in 2008. By Super Tuesday, the needle was moved. Because that Monday, they were teaching that speech in school.
The impossible. I love that. I love that. I love that. You know, it's interesting actually hearing you all talk about art as a tool for tackling the impossible, and for maybe art may make you think bigger and outside of the lines versus where you are. JR, where would you love to use your art next? You clearly have used your art on questions of immigration. You've used it on questions of identity. If you could dream the impossible, how else would you like to use your art?
You know, 7 years ago, I started a project where I was like, I'm not going to go in all those places around the world. Some places, it makes sense that I go because sometimes only a foreigner can do it. Like when I pasted the wall between Israel and Palestine, and in Israeli city and Palestinian city, only a foreigner can do it because someone from Israel couldn't go in Palestine and vice versa. So someone else had to take the risk. And it's still the same for a lot of the places. But I've opened it. I say, whoever want to send me his photo, I will print it and send it back for free wherever in the world he is. And that's been 7 years that this project called Inside Out have been walking around the world. And more than 140 or 130 countries and 400,000 posters have been sent and pasted. So when you see a posters that look like the one we're going to see right now, those ones, the photo are not taken by me. They're taken by the people or by photo booth truck. And as we're speaking right now, actually, we're doing a project where those photo booths are going all across the States in support of the dreamers. So dreamers can come and be photographed, or people in support of the dreamers. And that's happening in community. I'm here talking with you right now. I'm not there. Those people are actually pasting. They are actually pasting it all over, making an impact in their community. Because when I do a project like The Little Kid, yes, it's I'm pasting locally, but for a global impact. But what's more interesting is the local impact to the community. And that's what Inside Out's about. Those people in places that I've never been, and in places also sometimes that I would never even have the balls to go there. I've seen people pasting women's faces in Afghanistan. Like, you look online, there's been images of like a Pakistani child on a football field where the US drone are shooting to say that, there are kids here. People have done that by themselves. And often people call me and say, hey, wow, can you explain us how do you do that? I'm like, man, I'm at home right now watching TV. I don't know what you're talking about. And I say, you should call them and ask them why and how and what's their message. Because literally, the only rule of the project is that it have to be linked with no brand. It's just about a message, and it have to be people face. And it's going around the world. Anyone here can be part of it. It's a community project. And as we're talking, people are pasting those faces all across the US. Those photos have been taken in the last few days.
Laurene, yes. We only have a few minutes, but one of the big conversations that's going on right now in the country surrounds DACA. And obviously there's been talk over the last couple of months that President Trump and that some of the Democratic leaders might find common ground on that and might make something happen. How hopeful are you that something can happen? And if it does happen, what do you think will make the difference?
Well, I think from what people say, the only way that it's going to happen is to be attached to must-pass legislation by December 8th, before Congress takes a break. And so there is must-pass legislation around keeping the government running, that the DREAM Act or something similar to the DREAM Act could be attached to. There's one called the RAC Act that has some Republican support. I think there's a great deal of will across the country. There's a supermajority of Americans that want to find common sense immigration reform, that want to find a pathway to legalization and citizenships, not just for Dreamer, but also for their families. Whether or not our representatives actually respond is up to them. It's unusual for a population like Dreamers and all undocumented immigrants to actually have voice. Obviously, they can't vote in this country, and so they don't have any political power. So it's the rest of us who have to carry that power for them or share that power with them. And that's why these kind of actions that JR is doing with his team is so essential, because it shows the degree of common humanity and shared values and community support that exists everywhere across the country. And so if people in Washington are listening, the voices are being raised. So I'm somewhat hopeful we'll do our part and take out ads and write op-eds, and we've formed a dream coalition of mayors and governors and business leaders and general American citizens to start putting pressure, or continue to put pressure, because this is an issue that's been going on for 16 years pretty actively. And if it doesn't happen in December, people are still pushing for March, and if it doesn't happen in March, then we actually get to vote people out who aren't standing up for our values, and vote people in who are.
Will, what will you tackle next?
Try to tackle something new when you haven't really finished nailing down the first thing you try to tackle. I want to stay focused on what we've done in Boyle Heights and try to scale it to other, cities around the states. And
What do you say to people who say, I hear that, I like that, I wish I could do that too? How can I get involved? What do you say? Because a lot of people will hear you say that and will agree and think what you're saying is powerful, but they won't know how to find their way in. They may not know Ron, they may not know Laurene. What do you tend to say to those people?
well, there's 3 programs that you put together. That's College Track, First Robotics, and Code.org. You put those together, you will change a community. Aim yourself to surround as many 9-year-olds as possible and see them through till they're 29. If we ain't trying to protect 9-year-olds right now as a community, all of America, in every single, inner city, and even Brentwood. Brentwood's messed up. They ain't got no robotics program in Brentwood, the school I went to that changed my life. Well, whether you're rich or poor, we need to protect our 9-year-olds and our women. So in America right now, you have 2 things that contradict. There's a big contradiction happening right now. Like when they say, what about, how do you empower females? Like, whoa, what do you mean, how do we empower females? How do we acknowledge the power of a female? First, change the question. Right? You don't empower them, you acknowledge that, life is because of them. Like, it's just absurd that we don't see women as the gateway to life. Right? 1. 2, I don't want to speak on Hollywood right now, but it's a confusing, inspiring, sad, horrible thing that's going on there, and thank God, they're shedding light on it. But at the same time, that march, that Women's March, was for the same reasons. Mm-hmm. And because those women aren't famous, that have the same cry out, 15 women, and we still have a president, to me, that just doesn't make no sense. So when you protect a 9-year-old, you got to protect the 9-year-old not only for education, but also, just humanity, and how do you make sure that there's equal all over the place, equality all over the place. DACA as well. Here I am, African American. I don't know what part of Africa I come from. I'm American. My ancestors, they fought, and they were, all the civil rights leaders, they fought for us to have these freedoms, but I really don't know what part of Africa I come from. I'm American. We are American. So in the name of, as a matter of fact, we are immigrants. Native Americans are the real Americans. So how about we just say what it is and support these 9-year-olds so they ain't growing up confused and just repeat all this BS that we're doing right now.
JR, I'm going to let you bring us home. I'm curious, who inspires you? Who and what inspires you? What helps create your art and inspire your art?
I have to say, I've never been to art school or school. I haven't, I didn't know any art figure. I didn't know even there was a job for being an artist. You know, when I literally started pasting my photos in the street, I thought, like, try to convince me to go and present my book to someone that holds a little cube with 4 white walls where I could exhibit on the Champs-Élysées at 17 years old just by pasting on the Champs-Élysées. Of course, now I understand the power of it, but you know, nothing beats like the fight of taking over the largest wall around the world. So there's one thing is, I realized, you know, that if I was born 10 years earlier, I wouldn't have been able to do what I do. There was no, like, not everybody had a camera on their cell phone. Photography was a rich sport. You couldn't travel that easily, you know, on low-cost company. And also I was born in France. So with my passport, I could travel. So all this, and I guess the weird thing is that advertising must have inspired me in some way, because by looking at all those ads, there were, and more, I'm really from that generation that advertising became more and everywhere. And as a graffiti writer, you had to find the spaces that they couldn't take. And as an artist, after pasting those images, I always try to adapt to the architecture and to try to exist in front of those advertising. Now, what struck me is that when I went to Liberia, for example, you know, right after the conflict, and I started pasting in the street smaller images, the entire street would stop and ask, what is the purpose of this project? What does this image mean? Well, when I'm pasting here, someone stopped by and say, hey, who's paying for this and who's gonna clean it? And is our taxes like involved in this? It's a whole other conversation. And that's why I love doing the exact same technique, but in different contexts to observe, you know, the reaction. I went to North Korea and there was no discussions there, so it didn't work. But still, you know, I had to try.
Purpose and profit. Hey guys, big hand for a fantastic panel today. I think we will turn it back over to Tony. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tony. Unless he doesn't want to. Do you want us to go?
Carlos, I think that's a wrap. That was phenomenal, super inspirational. It was a highlight of my year and a highlight of Salesforce's year and a highlight of Dreamforce.